Hello friends, Frogopolis here, and today I would like to talk about the Psycho franchise. A series of movies I'm surprised I never watched earlier. Heck, I hadn't even seen the first one until recently. And after buying all 4 movies on DVD and binging them in one evening, as you do, I have some thoughts about these films. Also, before I begin, you may have seen my fancy thumbnail, which was made for me by OmelleteTheGreat from Reddit. I will put their socials below. Thank you, they did a great job. So without further ado, let's talk about some psychos.
She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
I was pretty excited to see the first Psycho. Sure, I knew all the broad strokes and all the pop culture references that came from it, but it's different to be finally able to experience the full film for myself. And, well, what do you know, that Alfred Hitchcock guy can direct a pretty good movie. Marion Crane is a woman in trouble. She's got a man on the side, she just stole $40K from her boss, and she's on the run. Even though I know what was going to happen to her, I still really enjoyed watching her trying to get away. It was very exciting. I really like how we're given time to know who Marion is, and we get an insight into her life and her troubles. You understand why she's doing this. I was so invested in her story that I almost forgot what movie this was until she pulled up to the Bates Motel on a rainy night. Norman Bates is this great mix of sincerity and kindness, but you can tell there is something very wrong. There's this great scene where after he kindly insists that they have dinner together, we have this awkward interaction between the two where we get to learn more about Norman and also his mother. His domineering mother who's far too sick to make her way to the motel, and spends all day in this beautiful large house next to it. Adding to the tension of the scene is the fact that it is only Mary and Norman here. There's no other guests at this motel. But Norman's kind yet awkward demeanor puts her at ease for now. Also, those sandwiches look really good. The conversation gets awkward when Marion suggests that since his mother seems to be a hassle, why doesn't Norman just put her in a home? Norman's offended by this statement, and they soon end the conversation. Then Norman decides to peep at her changing through a hole, so that's not good. After a long, hard day, Marion decides to take a refreshing shower before she's rudely interrupted. Despite the sheer amount of parodies of this scene through the years, I've never actually seen it in full, and the way they just have the water running as you stare at Marion's body for an uncomfortable amount of time is pretty brilliant. There's a very slow and methodical nature to this film that I find very effective because for the next little bit, it's just Norman cleaning up her body and hiding it. And you can tell that he's clearly done this before. This scene of the car slowly sinking into the bog is chilling, but also kinda satisfying. This isn't the end of Marion's story though, because remember, there's people looking for her. So we have Sam, who is Marion's lover, and he hasn't seen her in like a week by this point. And then there's Marion's sister who comes into town looking for her. But there's also a private investigator who's investigating the stolen $40,000. They are all rightfully concerned because it has been a week since they've seen her. The private investigator is convinced that she's still out on the lam, and he's going to search every motel to see if she is hiding out in one of them. He eventually gets to Bates Motel, and Norman is a very bad liar and makes himself look as guilty as possible. Despite this, the PI doesn't find anything too incriminating, so he goes to leave, and before he leaves, he rings up Lila, Marion's sister, to let her know what's going on. As he's talking to her, he starts to think that something isn't quite right, especially with that sick old mother in the house. So he decides, just to be safe, to talk to Norman one more time. him. He can't seem to find him, so he goes into the home. While he's going up the stairs looking for him, oh my god, it's his mother again with a knife. Okay, I know the twist, you know the twist, your grandparents know the twist. This movie's been out for 65 years. Norman's mom is dead, and because of her abuse, he dresses up as her when he kills people to sort of disassociate from what he's doing, because it's his mom telling him to kill those people. Of course, this twist didn't particularly age well in its 65 years, but I'm also not gonna lose sleep over it. So the PI hasn't shown up for a while, so Sam's like, I'm gonna go to where he went, see if everything's okay, and then come back. Goes there, no one's there because Norman's sinking the body into the bog. So after that pointless endeavor, they think, hey, maybe we should go talk to the sheriff. Him and Lila go to the sheriff's house to let him know that the PI's been gone for far too long. As they're talking, Norman's mother comes up in the conversation, and the sheriff says that can't be Norman's mother they keep seeing in the upstairs window, because Norman's mom has been dead for 10 years. This is where you act surprised and you stare mouth agape. Back of Norman, he's none too happy that people have been snooping around, and I love how wonderfully strange the arguments he has with his mother are. So the next day we find out that the sheriff went to the motel, didn't see anything weird, and just left. So Sam and Lila are like, well, screw that, we're gonna go there and look for clues. They sign in, Norman's acting as suspicious as ever. Through their detective work and some expert snooping, they finally find out what's really going on, which I've already covered. So, Norman gets arrested and they're at the police station. The psychiatrist comes in and just starts explaining what happened to the people there. Apparently, they were told to add this by the studio because they were worried that viewers would be confused. Though I do find it interesting that the psychiatrist points out that Norman is not trans. He only dresses up like this because of his alter ego that came from killing his mother and the years of abuse and all that. And it's easier for him to just disassociate and think that it's his mother telling him to do all this stuff. Though being the 60s, the verbiage used for trans people isn't exactly great. Overall, I did really enjoy this movie. I think everything came together really nicely. It was unnerving and suspenseful, and the acting was great. Anthony Perkins especially, his monologue to himself as mother at the end is very creepy and effective. And he's able to walk a fine line between menacing but also sympathetic. And 23 years later, you would find out what happened to Norman Bates in Psycho 2. Psycho 2 starts with Norman Bates being released from the psychiatric ward because they've deemed him safe to return back to regular society. This is much to the protest of Lila Loomis, which is perfectly understandable. This is the man that killed her sister. Nevertheless, Norman Bates is allowed to go free and starts working at a local diner. I really like Norman as a character because it's very easy to sympathize and relate to him. But you always remember at the back of your mind that he's killed people. Nevertheless, you see him starting his job at the diner and is trying to put his life back together. Yeah, I was rooting for him. When Norman gets out of the institution, he goes straight back to his old home. And that seems quite counterproductive. But you know what? It's been 22 years in the movie, and he's gonna be fine. So of course, almost immediately, he starts hearing his mother. Psycho 2 is a very good psychological thriller. It has the simple story of Norman trying to adjust to regular life after being institutionalized for so long, but slowly yet surely goes in a completely wild direction that works really well. But we're not there yet, so let's rewind a bit. While working at the diner, Norman meets a woman called Mary, and Mary's having boyfriend troubles and can't go back to his place where she's living, so Norman says, hey, you can stay at my place. This sounds like a great idea where nothing bad will happen. When he goes back to his place with her, he decides to check on the old motel, which has been under new management since he was arrested. He finds out that the guy who's been in charge, Warren Toomey, has turned it into a place for people to fool around. You know, do the horizontal shuffle, boink, make whoopee, do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. Other euphemisms. Norman isn't too thrilled to hear this, so he fires him. Safe to say, Warren isn't too thrilled to be fired. Mirroring the first film, there's a scene where Norman and Mary are having a sandwich and talking to each other. And Norman, being Norman, starts weirding her out. Though we'll find that Mary's experience of Norman is much different from Marion's. So the next day they're working at the diner, and Warren comes in just pissed drunk, SpongeBob style, and starts harassing Norman and accusing Mary of sleeping with him. I like the actor that plays him, Dennis Franz. He just oozes sleaze, and he's very good in his role. To make things worse, while he's taking orders, one of the papers seems to be from his mother. Poor Norman has a complete breakdown here where he yells at Warren to get out, and then has a panic attack over the note he just got. A note that he insists is real, but has mysteriously gone missing. And this is when things start to spiral out of control. Warren shows back up at the motel to further harass Norman and get his stuff back before he leaves. When Warren is packing up, we see that familiar dress, and Warren is stabbed to death. Things get interesting here because there's a lot of times where you think that it is Norman peeping in or spying on Mary, but you see that he's somewhere or doing something making it impossible that he was the one doing it. And on the other side of things, there's clearly somebody trying to convince Norman that his mother is still alive. And you have to think, is it all in his head? Is somebody placing this stuff there for him to find? And the movie does a great job at keeping you guessing. But Norman's the one that killed Warren, right? Well, outside of the phone calls and letters, Norman starts seeing a figure where his mother's bedroom was. On one of these occasions, he's lured into the attic and locked in there. Meanwhile, two no-good hooligans break into the basement so they can smoke pot and make out. And everyone knows if you do that in a horror movie, you're going to die. And at least one of them do when we see that familiar dress yet again, and the guy is killed, but the girl gets away. But Norman was in the attic, but when Mary finds him up there, the door is unlocked and he could have left whenever he wanted. The sheriff arrives at Norman's house because the girl from earlier had told them that their boyfriend was killed in his cellar. When the sheriff starts looking around the house, the basement is cleaned up and there's no evidence left. And Mary helps make an alibi for Norman. At this point, Norman is convinced that he's lost it again and he's gone back to killing people, despite Mary telling him otherwise. So what's going on here? Well, Mary goes to meet with her mother, Lila Loomis. Lila did say she wanted to make sure he went back to jail, so her and Mary have been planting all of this stuff around, acting as his mother and making those calls to make him think he's gone crazy and frame him. But Mary has actually fallen in love with Norman at this point and refuses to continue helping her, much to her mother's disappointment. We also find out that neither of them were the one who killed that guy in the basement. I haven't talked about it much, but throughout the movie, Mary and Norman actually have really good chemistry. Meg Tilly, who plays Mary, does a great performance here. She's a highlight of the film. I felt really bad that she had essentially betrayed him, even though she now regrets it. Then you have the parallels between Mary and Norman, where Mary also has a mother who is dictating her life. Though in Lila's case, I do understand where she's coming from, this guy killed her sister. That feeling does not leave you even 22 years later, so of course you wouldn't want him to get out. Though how she goes about it, along with involving her daughter, is certainly not devoid of scrutiny. Norm is completely convinced that his mother somehow came back from the grave and is haunting him, but thankfully his psychiatrist shows up, and he's been doing some of his own detective work, so he tells Norm that no, Mary and Lila are mother and daughter, and they've been screwing with ya. Norman has a hard time believing this because he believes that the woman he's been talking to on the phone is his mother, and that it can't be Lila. So his psychiatrist goes as far as to have his mother's body exhumed so he can see that she is very much dead. He confronts Mary about this, and Mary fully admits that it was her and her mother doing all of this to him, and she feels horrible about it. Just then, they get a phone call, and Norman is convinced that this is his mom or somebody else. Mary also gets on the line and tells Lila to stop calling them. But this might not be Lila. Now Norman is fully convinced that, fine, my mom is dead, so this must be my real mom. This confrontation gets interrupted by the police once again because they found Toomey's car and body. Norman says he had nothing to do with that, and the sheriff says that he's on to Mary and knows what she's doing with her mother. Despite what Mary says, Lila is not done with Norman, and we see her go to the cellar and take out the dress that she's been using to pretend to be his mother. But then, just when you think there's no more twists, another person comes down wearing the same dress and kills Lila. I probably can't show it because of YouTube, but I wasn't expecting her death to be so, gnarly. The clock's ticking for Norman and Mary. Mary tries to convince Norman that they need to leave now, but she underestimated how much damage she and her mother have already done to Norman's psyche, as Norman tells Mary that his mother wants him to kill her. So now Mary runs to the basement where the dress is still there, and she puts it on and she puts on the wig. She tries to pretend to be Norman's mother. She's having trouble getting through to him, so she goes upstairs and tries the old I'm gonna call him and pretend to be his mom trick. While she's doing that, she's confronted by Dr. Raymond, who she stabs because he startles her. You'd expect him to just fall down the stairs like in the first movie, but instead he falls off the railing, hits another railing on his way down, and then dies. Damn, this sequel is not rocking around. I love this climax. She's holding the butcher knife and she's trying to get Norman to back away. He's not going to, so she stabs him in the chest, but he keeps coming. Then when she goes to stab him again, he literally holds on to the knife and his hands just get all cut up. During the struggle, she finds out that her mother's dead. Right as this happens, she goes to go attack Norman with the knife again, but the police show up and shoot her. Later on, when Norman is at the police station, the sheriff, after doing some very thorough investigation, concludes that it must have been Mary who killed Warren and that kid, and it was her mother putting all those notes around the house and doing the prank calls. So, case closed. Norman is innocent and he go back home. Norman's back home and he goes to make a sandwich, and as he's enjoying it, he gets a knock on the door. You might remember an elderly lady from near the beginning of the movie. She works at the diner, and her name is Emma Spool. Well, you see her here and there throughout the movie, but she's more of a secondary character. Because things couldn't get more batshit, we find out that Emma is Norma's sister, and that she might be Norman's real mother. On top of that, she was the one going around killing people in this movie, so Norman was actually innocent the entire time. This twist is pretty fun, but it does have you have to suspend the disbelief that Norman just never knew his mother's maiden name, or that she had a sister, but that's plausible enough considering she was institutionalized, so she probably just never talked about her. But at the end of the day, you should just tell yourself that it's just a movie and that you should really just relax. So anyway, Norman poisons her tea, and then as she's dying from the tea, he hits her over the head of a shovel. Then he takes her body, starts talking to it like it was his mother, and brings the body up to her room. As crazy as this ending is, it's also very sad. I really did want to see Norman succeed and lead a normal life, but it also reminds you that his actions did have consequences and did affect people that aren't going to forget. I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. It was really good. The writing was good, it kept you guessing, it was suspenseful, heck, it was pretty scary at times. And I think it's a worthy follow-up to the original Psycho. But how did they do in the third movie? You know, the third movie is usually the cursed one. Let's find out.
Don't laugh at me, Mother. Don't laugh at me.
Psycho 3 is actually directed by Anthony Perkins himself, which I found pretty interesting, and apparently he has only directed one other thing. A movie called Lucky Stiff from 1988. I wonder what it's about. Let's see here. A plump loser, after being left at the altar by his fiancée, is invited to Christmas dinner by a beautiful woman, but her family are cannibals who intend to have him as the main course. Huh. You know, I might actually check that out. Back to Psycho 3, which has one hell of an opening. We start the movie with Maureen Coyle, a nun who's in dire strait, and standing on a windowsill at the top of the church. When the other nuns confront her and try to get her to come down from the ledge, she accidentally knocks one of them over, causing them to fall to their death. Now, they could get the police or a hospital involved, but they just tell her to leave instead. And then we see her trekking through the desert with nothing but her suitcase. Yes, this is a Psycho movie, and we'll see Norman Bates any minute now. So she's walking along the highway and she's trying to hitch a ride. Somebody stops for her. This man is called Dwayne Duke. And I'm sorry to all the Dwaynes out there, no matter how it's spelled, but this guy is just a walking red flag. We get treated to a long and uncomfortable car ride between the two as he talks about his aspirations to be a rock star. Maureen has every right to be very uncomfortable around Dwayne. As they're driving, a rainstorm starts up. They pull over because they may as well sleep it out. This goes exactly how you would imagine, and thankfully Maureen yells at him and demands to be let out of the car even though it's pouring rain, and she continues on her way alone. After this, we see Bates Motel, and it's Norm! And he's picking up dead birds to do taxidermy on. Hi Norm. Here we get a good idea of what happened to Emma Spool at the end of the second movie. When Norman is doing his taxidermy, he hallucinates instead himself stitching up an arm. He hears someone outside, and goddammit, it's that asshole. Dwayne noticed the help wanted sign outside the motel, so he came in looking for work because he needs to fix his car, and Norman hires him. After showing Dwayne the ropes, Norman decides to go down to the old diner to get his new employee and him some burgers. There we see the sheriff talking with the owner about how Emma Spool hasn't shown up to work for a month. Overhearing this conversation is reporter Tracy Venable, who wants to talk to Norman Bates because she's doing an article on rehabilitation. Norman comes in to order his stuff. While he's waiting, Tracy sees this as the perfect time to talk to him. While a bit hesitant, Norman is up front of Tracy and tells her that while his past actions will never truly leave him, he is going to try his best to be a better person. As they're talking, a truck truck pulls up and Maureen comes out of it. This distracts Norman because right away, Maureen looks a lot like Marion Crane to him. The initials on her luggage are even MC. This freaks out Norman, so he pays for his burgers and goes back to the motel. Later that day, Maureen shows up at the Bates Motel looking for a place to stay, and is shocked to see Dwayne. I feel so horrible for her here. You can see the fear on her face when she sees Dwayne again. He does attempt to apologize, but you can tell she wants none of it. She just wants to pay for her room and get away from him. Meanwhile, Norman is telling his mother all about this girl that looks like Marion, and since this is a conventionally attractive woman, the mother wants her dead. I really like how this scene is shot. It's very eerie. We're back with Tracy Venable as she continues to investigate Norman Bates. By chance, she runs into Dwayne and notices that Dwayne works at the Bates Motel. She works out a deal with him to get some information on our old Norman. We're back with Norman and, oh Norman, don't do that. Ah, jeez. Looks like he's back at it again as he dons his murder outfit, but in a rather surprising and terrifying twist from the original, Norman doesn't kill her because, well, she was already trying to do that to herself. Norman snaps out of it and helps her and gets her to the hospital. As Maureen is fading away, we see that she sees Norman as the Mother Mary. Thankfully, Maureen survives, and now at the hospital, Norman insists that she stay at the motel for free while she recovers. Wait a second, this seems familiar. It'll be fine this time. So we're back with Dwayne the Dick Johnson, and he brought a lady with him home that night, and they... You know, I'm actually not entirely sure what this is. Unfortunately for her, Mother is not too happy that she's doing the hanky-panky. After a rude exit from Dwayne's room, she's completely naked this time. I can't show anything. Norman takes her out while she's trying to call for a taxi. We now see Maureen, who is still recovering in the hospital, and talking to the hospital psychiatrist. This gives us more insight into her past and how she ended up here. While not always perfect, I do find it interesting how they cover different forms of mental health and trauma in each movie. By now, she's well enough to go back to the motel, and Norman comes by to bring her back. Today, the motel is unusually busy because it's the Fairvale's homecoming football game. Go Fairvale! Norman is just completely mortified by this revelation. Tracy Venable is also here, as Norman isn't too thrilled to see her, probably because of the whole murder thing, so he demands that she leaves. Maureen is surprised and very happy to see that Norman had gotten her dressed clean and pressed. Norman, you sly dog, you. We're back with Tracy Venable, as she goes to Emma Spool's old apartment and looks for clues. And boy does she find some, as this magazine is just covered with Norman's phone number. Later that day, Norman has a lovely date with Maureen. It's really nice to see someone have genuine affection towards him. Once again, Norman has great chemistry with the woman playing opposite him. That night, when everyone else is partying, Norman and Maureen get passionate. But they get a little nervous and this ends up cuddling, and it's very sweet. Unfortunately, when Maureen wakes up later on, Norman's nowhere to be seen. We see that Norman is arguing with Mother. His budding relationship with Maureen and the party going on seems to be a bit too much for him. I like how he just has the dress and wig with the butcher knife in a cabinet like it's his bat suit. Unfortunately, his victim is this very kind lady who was a good extra in her little role. Rest in peace. I also like these two extras. They're making the most of their time. The next day we find out that this woman has been reported missing. The police are at Norman's house to ask him some questions. He, of course, continues to deny that anything had happened and that she must have just wandered off because everyone was drunk that night. But in actuality, her body's in the icebox. The sheriff opens the icebox and just doesn't look inside. He opened it so he can grab some ice cubes and just chew on them. I could say this is far-fetched, but you know what? No, not really. Maureen is also told more about Norman's past, and this causes her to second-guess the relationship and leave. This devastates Norman, and this causes him to go to his mother and give them a piece of his mind. But Mother isn't there. Instead, there's a note telling him to come find her in one of the cabins. This leads to my favorite scene in the whole movie. We discover that Dwayne has taken his mother's body and is essentially holding it hostage. I love Jeff Fahey here. He plays Dwayne so well. He's just been the perfect scumbag the entire film. The lighting and atmosphere, along with Dwayne playing his guitar, is just such a great setup for this scene. Remember, Dwayne has been sent to spy on Norman. He knows everything. He knows about the murders, he knows about his dead mother, and now he's blackmailing him. Norman is having none of this shit though and throws an ashtray right at his head. I love the detail of how the cartoon is continuing to play in the background and mirroring what's happening in the scene. We get a poetic ending as Dwayne is beaten with his own guitar. We're back with Tracy Venable. She's getting more information on who exactly Emma Spool was, and she starts putting it all together. Maureen is talking to the hospital psychiatrist again, and decides that Norman deserves forgiveness, and she's gonna go back to him. Norman's driving out to the old bog to get rid of Dwayne's body, but Dwayne turns out to be not quite dead, and they start struggling in the car as it careens into the water. This movie continues to impress me. This is a really intense scene. Norman manages to fight him off and barely escapes. He gets home and he's trying to gather himself when Maureen shows up and, "Oh God, Maureen, don't go on the stairs!" Norman is startled by his mother's voice and accidentally knocks Maureen down the stairs. I hate to say it, but it unintentionally looks pretty funny. Norman is understandably completely distraught and heartbroken. Tracy Venable shows up to the motel to confront Norman. Unfortunately for her, Norman's not there. It's mama time. She runs for her life while trying to explain to Norman what she found out about Emma Spool and why he needs to stop. Emma was his aunt and she was in love with Norman's father, and there's this whole love triangle thing. Thankfully for Tracy, Norman has realized that she's ruining his life. He's able to resist her mentally berating him and ends up attacking her instead of Tracy, symbolically killing her. Good on you, Norman. Early the next day, he gives himself up to the police and he's finally free of his mother. Probably. Maybe. Apparently Anthony Perkins didn't think he did a great job directing here, thinking he was too inexperienced. But I don't think that's true. There's a lot of good cinematography here and scene transitions. Overall, it tells a very compelling story with some great performances. 3 movies down, and they've all been pretty damn good. So now, we're on the last one. Psycho 4, The Beginning.
He was stung to death by bees.
This is certainly the most uncomfortable of the 4 movies, so, buckle up. This one begins with a radio show where they're discussing matricide, people that kill their mothers. And this seems right up someone's alley. They receive a call from Norman Bates himself, but he's calling himself Ed, and he wants to give his own expert insight on this topic. Wait a second, Norman, what are you doing out of jail again? We'll get there. Being an origin story, we'll have scenes where we see young Norman Bates, played by Henry Thomas. I didn't realize until looking up the movie afterwards that this is the same guy who played Elliot in E.T., so get ready to see him in a totally different way after this. Our radio host is DJ Fran Ambrose, played by CCH Pounder, joined by a psychiatrist, Dr. Leo Richmond, played by Warren Frost, who you may recognize as Dr. Will Hayward from Twin Peaks. Norman seems to want to get a lot off his chest, and he talks about the first girl he murdered. Oh, and he also says he might kill again, so you know, there's that. This one, and one we'll see later on, are actually mentioned as far back as the first film, as the psychiatrist back then mentioned 2 missing girls. We get our first flashback where we see a girl named Holly flirting with a young Norman, and it is about as awkward as you would imagine. Holly decides to go into the Bates house after Norman tells her not to. They kinda start fooling around, but I don't think Norman is quite into this. Then he hears something and he goes to go check on his mother, and there she is again on her same old shit about, oh, she's bad, you need to kill her. I like this detail where when he's talking to her, there is an actress in the bed and she's moving around, but then when he gets closer, you see the reality that she's a corpse. Unfortunately for Holly, Mother takes over and she soon meets a terrible fate. This is all a bit much for Norman, so he hangs up for now. Soon after hanging up, his wife Connie calls. That's right, our boy Norman is married. She works as a nurse at the institution Norman was being held at, explaining how he is out once again. Through this conversation, we find out that it's Norman's birthday! Happy birthday, Norman Bates! That seems to help him gain his composure, and he goes back to talking to the radio show, who very much want to keep him on the line. I like how this movie uses a radio show as a storytelling device. You have this psychiatrist giving a more analytical analysis of Norman, and then you have the radio host being more personal and grounded. They're both very good in their roles and work well off Norman. So do you want to know how Norman's dad died? He died by bee stings. A bunch of bee stings. Here we get a better look at Norman's mother, Norma Bates, played by Olivia Hussey, who I mostly know from Black Christmas. Very quickly, we realize that she is not a very stable person. After the father's death, they only have each other, and it's a very complicated and toxic relationship. Norma heavily relies on Norman, but also seems to resent him and constantly berates him, but also showering him with affection. Even now, Norman can't bring himself to say that he hated his mother. While there's never anything explicit, there's a clear innuendo between him and his mother that's very hard to watch. Norman states that it never went anywhere, but you can imagine the sheer confusion and trauma he felt from this. In a way of coping with this, Norman tells Fran that he believes that his psychopathy is hereditary, feeling he would have ended up like this anyway even without his mother's abuse. We get a particularly disturbing scene where, during a very hot summer, his mother asks him to massage her legs. Things get worse when they start joking around, and oh god. Okay, how do I tackle this scene? Norma berates Norman and wishes that she had a girl instead. She then forces a dress on him, smears him with lipstick, and locks him in the closet. While they did make the differentiation in the first film, I do still find this hard to watch. In a vacuum, this insinuates very harmful stereotypes. I do genuinely like these movies and think that Norman Bates' story is very compelling. And while I've been able to ignore the elephant in the room for the past 2 films, this one brings it back in full force. I really do wish they had tackled some parts of the story differently. We're back with the radio show, and now they're all talking privately as Norman is hung up once again. It's now obvious to them that not only is it Norman Bates, but he is clearly a danger to others. And they argue about how to best handle this situation. Fran feels that the psychiatrist is putting Norman on edge, and that her more personal approach is working better at keeping him on the line, and coming back to continue talking to them. After a heated back and forth, they eventually just ask the psychiatrist to leave, much to his protest. You might realize that I have not talked about Connie for quite some time, and that's because, unfortunately, there is not much to talk about. Norman does discuss the relationship a little bit, but never in a way that I felt was super significant. She's more there as a plot device, and I never really felt that invested in her. Which is a real shame because in the past two movies he had great chemistry with the woman around him. Soon the discussion goes back to why Norman killed his mother. One of the driving factors, besides her abuse, was the fact that she started seeing a man. This is Chet. He's a real asshole and he's getting between Norman and his mom. Norman gets pretty pissed off talking about Chet and breaks an apple in half with his bare hands. During all this, the people working at the radio station are trying to get in contact with the police so they can let them know that, hey, we have Norman Bates on the line and he says he's going to kill again. Back with Norman and Fran, Norman is talking about how going in and out of institutions hasn't seemed to have been helping him, and even though he has worked to get past his mother, there's always going to be a little part of her inside of him. We then learn about Norman's second victim, Gloria. She's just making out with Norman inside of her car. But Norman has more important things to do than make out with some lady. He has to give his mother her medicine, who he gets into an argument with again, before showing up again from the back seat and strangling her. This murder is particularly brutal and chilling, as he doesn't kill her right away as he thought he did. So when she shows signs of life again, he has to strangle her. Then he puts her in the trunk and starts pushing it into the bog. As the car is sinking into the bog, we start hearing banging on the trunk door. This leads Fran to ask him when did this murderous feeling truly start for him, and when did he start hearing his mother's voice. It was shortly after her death during the funeral. So after the funeral, Norman just kind of takes her body out of the coffin, and I guess this brings it home. He's super sneaky like that. We get to see those taxidermy skills at work as he taxidermies his mom. We learn that the radio show ends at 10 o'clock, and now Fran is in a race against the clock to try to stop Norman from killing somebody. She asks him how his wife would feel if he just threw his life away because of this urge he has. Until we get the absolutely horrifying revelation that his victim is going to be his wife, because she got pregnant and wants to keep the baby. Norman does not want another one of him in the world. He truly believes that his murderous tendencies are genetic. Anthony Perkins and CCH Pounder are so good working against each other here. They've both been great throughout the entire film. Fran is now desperately trying to keep Norman on the line and talk him out of killing his wife. This leads into Norman talking about the first time he killed, and we finally see what happened to Norma and her boyfriend Chet. He gives them poisoned lemonade, and then we get this absolutely agonizing death sequence where they realize what he did. They chase after him, but the poison is already taking effect, and when Norman thinks they're both gone, he drags his mother's body down to the basement. Then he gets jump scared by Chet. But no, it's fine. He's dying. He's dead. We're good. Norman watching his mother die must be such a mix of emotions. It's just such an eerie and honestly heartbreaking scene. Olivia Hussey is very good in this scene and has been great throughout the entire movie. I could say her performance is a bit over the top at times, but she's just so good. Despite Fran's efforts, it eventually turns to 10 o'clock. Norman says time's up, and he hangs up on her. Norman calls his wife and asks her to come to the Bates Motel. She can tell something is very wrong. She has trouble getting through to him and realizes the danger she's in. In a kind of ridiculous scene, he opens up one of the closets and takes out the same knife that he's had for like 30 years now. There's an intense chase between the two, but thankfully he finally listens to her. She tells him that he's not that that person anymore, and that the baby's going to have some of her in them too. She speaks to the passionate and caring man that she's known for all these years. They start to leave, but Norman knows what he has to do. He is going to finally burn that house down. As he's going room to room, he's running into ghosts of his past. Things start to look a little dire for Norman, but he finds a way out of the house and gets away safely. He reunites with his wife, and it looks like he can finally start living his own life. And that's it. It's a shame the ending doesn't really do much for me. Like, the whole thing with the burning down the house was very interesting and him running into the ghosts, but his relationship with his wife, this seemed very half-baked to me, so the emotional impact of it all wasn't really felt. While I certainly have my issues with this film, I still think it is pretty good overall, and does make a fairly satisfying end to the franchise. As a whole, I really liked these movies. Great characters and writing makes up for some of its weaker points. And while parts of it certainly didn't age well, I still recommend checking these out. Anthony Perkins would unfortunately pass away a couple years after this movie, but I'm glad he was able to leave his mark. While the Psycho franchise is what he's most known for nowadays, he had a long and storied career that deserves to be celebrated. Thank you for watching, and if you've seen these movies, what did you think of the Psycho franchise? I would love to hear your thoughts. Once again, I want to give a big thank you to OmelleteTheGreat for making my thumbnail. I've put their socials below. And I would like to make a big thank you to all of you for watching this and my other work. It's very appreciated. If you would like to see more, like and subscribe, or leave a little comment. Either way, I'm just happy you stopped by, and I'll see you next time. Bye.